and today we're going to talk about the fundamentals of breathing. Now, remember, there's a few things to remember about breathing when it applies to being a brass player. The first of all is that this is our most fundamental skill. We are brass wind players, so the wind is what makes everything possible that we do on the instrument. It creates the sound that we're trying to achieve. It achieves the range that we're trying to achieve, and it impacts so importantly on technique and obviously musicality. So, a couple things about breathing. First of all, in order to breathe properly, it is a skill we must practice. We have to be mindful about, and we have to be thinking about the process. Our goal is to eventually break down this skill so that eventually this skill becomes part of our operating system, part of the background. It happens automatically, and that frees up our brain to work on music and technique, etc. But in order to get there, we have to practice it over and over. The brain will understand these concepts very quickly. The body only learns through repetition. So even though we understand what we're trying to do for breathing, we have to practice it with the body to achieve, in essence, the muscle memory of breathing. And finally, a little note on breathing is that isolating any skill in your practice routine, in other words, put the instrument down, put the mouthpiece down, and practice just that specific skill. Or if it's a tonguing exercise, practice just the articulations with the wind. Isolating any skill makes for quicker learning. All right, so let's take a look at breathing. So in order to give you an example of what a proper breath for any wind instrument, technically, or certainly for brass wind, I'm going to tap into some of my other senses. A good breath has a sound, it has a look, and it has a feel. So I'm going to use my eyes, I'm going to use my touch, and I'm going to use my ears to help establish a proper breath. So let's start by letting me demonstrate a breath. And I'm going to use my hand. I'm going to put my hand on my belly here, right at the diaphragm. And I'm going to put my other hand out here. So these are where I'm going to feel my touch. This hand is the visual. I want you to look at this. So this is a skill you might want to practice in a mirror, or if you have a camera set up, take pictures of yourself doing this. Take a video of yourself doing this. And the sound, of course, we're going to use our ears. Here's a good breath. Let's see if you can pick up on this. So, let's start with the sound. What is the sound that you hear? And I want you to think of it in terms of what vowel am I making? Let me do it again, and let's see if you can listen to that vowel. What vowel do you hear? Yes, the O vowel. Now, the O vowel is our most relaxed shape of our mouth and our throat. It's open. It establishes the shape of the wind column that we want coming in, but more importantly, it establishes the shape of the wind column that we want moving out through the instrument. Okay? And the other thing about it is, again, it's relaxed. As we're starting our playing and our breathing, we want tension only here with our embouchure. Everything from here on down until we get to the very low abdominal muscles is to be relaxed. Okay? So there's the sound, O. And that sound, O, was both on the inhale and on the exhale. Now, the other thing you might have heard was O on the inside inhale, and a toe on the exhale. And that was me starting to use a little bit of our articulation, the T syllable. Okay, you can do this O-ho or O-toe. Okay. Now, let's look at the look. So for the look, I'm putting my hand here on my belly, and this is part of what oftentimes with my younger players, I'll talk about belly breathing. Technically, we're talking about breathing from the diaphragm. And let's just look at this diagram of the diaphragm and what the diaphragm does. Okay? The diaphragm is this muscle that separates the abdomen from the chest. And when we inhale, this muscle contracts and flattens out. Okay. When we relax, when that relaxes, it comes back into position and the air is pushed out of the lungs. So when that contracts, it's actually creating space up here in the lungs, creating a vacuum, and the air rushes in. So that's one of the key things to remember is we're not sucking in air. We are making room for the air to fill our lungs. And obviously, if we make more room, then we get a bigger breath. Now, why does this hand expand out like this? Why does my belly expand when I inhale? Well, when the diaphragm flattens out, all this stuff has to go somewhere, right? And some of us have a little bit more stuff than others. But as that contracts down, this has to go out here to make room for that contraction. That creates the vacuum. The air rushes in, and we have a full inhalation. Now, as we relax that air moves out, and we have our breath for the trumpet. Now, one of the kind of things neat about this diagram is when you exhale, it talks about the diaphragm relaxes and the air is pushed out of the lungs. If we ever tighten that or bear down on that or hold our breath, the diaphragm is no longer relaxed. And the moment we have that tension here in the diaphragm, the air stops, the wind stops, and therefore our sound stops, our technique stops. All of those things that are so important for brass players and wind players. We've stopped feeding the instrument the wind that it needs to function. So, with that in mind, our upper body is always relaxed. We never bear down or we never tighten. We always are relaxed and let the diaphragm and the wind do its work for us. The other corollary is that we never hold our breath. If we hold our breath, we're not relaxed. We've stopped the diaphragm from moving. So that means there's no air moving through the instrument anymore. So when we're taking our inhale, I can do this in several motions. I'm still open. I'm not bearing down. I'm still open. I can kind of exhale a little bit slightly, and then I can let the diaphragm truly flow, relax and the air flow. Okay. The other thing that's important to think about in this, because of our diaphragm, is our posture. If we're sitting like this, we really can't make room to breathe. Try that once. When you're bending over, is it easier or more difficult to breathe? And the obvious answer is it's much more difficult to let this work. So our posture is very important. If we sag, we're not efficient. I call our good posture, I call it a puppet posture. If I'm sitting like this and I'm a puppet, think of it like I have a string going down through my head to the base of my spine. And if I just pull that string upward, I lengthen all of this breathing apparatus. I lengthen it out, and that lengthening gives me more room to expand and fill up and flow the wind. Okay? So, if you have any questions, we'll have to look for email questions, but that's the basics of the diaphragm and, again, the look of our breathing. Now, one more little aspect of all that we're doing here, okay? These other senses really help our brain figure this out. Again, brain and body are connected. Brain will figure it out pretty quickly, but the body needs to have these messages. So one of the things I do for myself and with my students is when I'm starting this breath, I'll do a few taps here. Tap, 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 tap. Right on the diaphragm, right where I want to expand. And when you tap, you notice that you feel with your hand, but you also feel with the belly. That means it's sending messages up to the brain through the nerve system. And what we're sending to the brain is this right here is where I want to expand. I don't want to do this. I'm not tapping here. I don't want to expand up here because that's not really the diaphragm. I'm not making room to fill those lungs. I'm not creating space. I want to down here. And the other thing you'll find out about when you try this, if you're new to this, is that it's a little bit counterintuitive, which means it's backwards from what seems normal. We kind of think we should suck in our belly to suck in air. But remember, we're not sucking in air, we're creating space. So tap, 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 tap. Send that message to the brain. Right here is where I want to expand. And I think about pushing that belly out. If all you do is push that belly out, it creates space because the way we do that is with our diaphragm. And you'll get a breath. So if you just think, sucking my gut a little bit here and now I'm going to push it out, there's the expansion that we're looking for. So now we've talked about the sound and we've talked about the look. O and expanding from the diaphragm in the belly. One more little aspect on the look. When I'm filled up with air and I relax and let the air wind start to flow, what does this look like? See how it collapses? Very much like a balloon. If you filled a balloon and you just let the air out through a tight embouchure, which is what we're actually doing, the wind just collapses and creates the wind. So, using a little toy here, the expansion. We'll come back to that toy again a little bit more. All right. Sorry to digress there. All right. Let's talk about the feel. Okay? Now, my other hand was up here for the feel. And as I did this, what I'm feeling is wind. I can feel the wind moving against the back of my hand. I use the back of my hand because the back of the hand is a little bit more sensitive. Now, why do I have it out here? To feel the wind? Yeah, well, I can feel the wind here. Or actually, I'm pretty good at this. I could feel the wind way out here. But why do I do this? Why do I have it here? Now remember, I'm a trumpet player. Actually, I don't know if I've said that, but I'm a trumpet player. So, one of the things that we tap into our brain is the ability to visualize. When we picture things in our brain, when we visualize something, we're much more effective at conveying commands than breaking everything down into words. So I can say, oh, I want to blow out to my hand here. But really what I want to do, I want to visualize blowing wind through my trumpet and on out beyond to the audience. So if I'm doing it here, I'm only really thinking about blowing to my mouthpiece. But when I'm doing here, I'm picturing blowing that steady stream of wind right through my instrument all the way out to the audience. So again, that's why I do this distance. That distance works pretty well for trombone players who have their trombone here. They can picture blowing through that bell. Of course, they've got more tubing to go. But again, it's the visualization of through the instrument out to the audience. So, what am I feeling? I'm feeling wind. And what is the definition of wind? Well, some people, you're right, some people say air, but wind is something more than just air, isn't it? Air is here, but wind is, yes, moving. So I always ask my students, what makes the leaves on the trees move? And of course, the obvious answer is wind, yes. So I'm not only thinking about air, I'm thinking about wind. And that's the moving the air, again, through the instrument. All right. So we've got a good posture. We've got the sound. We've got the look, the expansion and collapse. And we've got the feel of that moving wind. Our upper body is never relaxed, or is always relaxed. We never hold our breath because you can't be relaxed and hold your breath. And we've got a good puppet posture. All right. So let's take a real quick look at how we practice this. Okay, so those are the fundamentals. Now we practice this. And this is something that I do as part of my daily routine. I have about 7 different steps that I always go through. And I always start with breathing. If you want to know the other steps of my daily routine, well, then that's the information for another mini masterclass. Okay? But this breathing exercises are always the first thing I do. And I do this at the beginning of the day, the first time I play in the day. But I also do this a little bit every time I pick up the instrument. So if I practice in the morning and then I have a rehearsal in the evening, before I sit down to kind of get myself going again, warm up for that rehearsal or a concert, I'll do some of this basic breathing steps of my routine. All right. So our first step is just to do some deep breathing. Okay? And I use the hand, and I put the hand on my belly. I do the tap tap to send the motion to the brain. Because if you've noticed, this breath is not how we breathe when we're just sitting around the classroom, the office, the dinner table. If you sat in your classroom and you leaned over to your buddy and said, "Hi, can you help me with that math problem? I'm having a lot of problems," they'd probably slap you silly. Or certainly they'd think you're weird, right? But that's how we have to breathe for the playing a wind instrument, for playing a brass instrument. So we have to restart and refocus our body and our brain and our breathing to switch gears and get into the gear of being a brass player again. Okay? So I just do some deep breathing exercises. I tap tap. I have my hand. Good. Now, a couple of notes about that. First of all, if you notice, I don't breathe evenly, inhale evenly across the whole breath. I tend to fill more towards the back part of the breath. If there was a curve, it would be like this. And as I get higher, I'm filling up more. And that's because I don't want to get bound up and tense. Now, I can take that inhalation and stay relaxed. But if you think about filling kind of towards the back part of the breath, it's easier to keep the tension out of your chest. Okay? The other notice or thing you should know about doing these deep breathing is when we're just sitting here talking, this provides a lot more oxygen than you probably need. In essence, you might find yourself hyperventilating a little bit. So if you start to feel a little bit lightheaded, I tell my students, just enjoy the feeling. If you feel dizzy, put your head down a little bit and let the pass. But that's just your body getting more oxygen than it needs because you're not actually then blowing it through the trumpet. When we get going with the instrument, you won't have that issue. Okay? So we've done a couple deep breathing exercises. Oh, ho. And now, also, I start to introduce oh, inhale, toe. And that's using that articulation, a nice T front to our articulations. Okay? And so it sounds like this. Okay? All right. Now, there may be a little bit of variation in that exhale syllable, depending on your instrument. Our low brass friends will tend to very much with the O. They don't have quite the back pressure that the smaller instruments like the trumpet has. Okay, so the larger instruments may stick with that toe and move that wind through the instrument that way. Trumpet players, we need to overcome a little bit of that back pressure. So sometimes our exhalation, especially as we get higher, will be a little bit more and that's actually not a sound that we have in our English language. If you look in the German language, an O with the two dots and umlaut over it, Goethe, those kind of sounds. But the closest, we can kind of get close to it in English. If you say few, kind of that way. Or if you try to say the word bird, but without the R, so there are some sounds you can make with that exhalation that gives a little bit more speed to the wind for the higher brass players to overcome that back pressure. All right, so we've done some deep breathing, just straight in and out. Oh, ho. Now, let's do a couple exercises in tempo, because music is in time. One of the definitions you might use for music is its sound organized in time somehow. It may be very loosely organized, like a more modern piece, bloop, 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 bloop. But there's some sort of time there. And so with that pulse, we need to be able to practice breathing in time. If you're with a conductor, what do we call that when a conductor gives the upbeat? We call that a prep beat. So usually when I'm playing with the conductor, I'll breathe on that preparatory beat. If you were going to count us off, you'd go 1, 2, 3. So I would inhale with that prep beat, the upbeat with the conductor's hand, and exhale on his or her downbeat. Now, we don't always play with a conductor, right? We might be in chamber music, we might be in the quintet, or if you're practicing on your own. So I want you to establish that pulse. And just the easiest way to do this is to think as if we were in 4/4 time. If we're in 4/4 time in a moderate tempo, I'm going to think 1, 2, 3, inhale where 4 would be, exhale where 1 would be. That's as if we're starting right on the downbeat of a 4/4 bar. So it looks like this. And I've still got my hands, I'm still trying to feel, and I'm thinking 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay? Now, sometimes we don't start on 1, do we? But if you use that same idea that at a moderate tempo, I'm going to breathe 1 beat before. Let's say it's a pickup beat 4 that we have to start on. So we're going 1, 2, 3, toe, toe. My breathing would be on what count? Yes, beat 3. So I'm thinking 1, 2. Okay. Now that's at medium tempos. Music happens at all different speeds, so you need to practice this breathing in tempo at different speeds. I've got my kind of a medium tempo. 1, 2, 3. I have to do it slow. 1, 2, 3. And I might have to do it fast. 1, 2, 3. Now, when tempos get really fast, I may breathe over a couple counts. It's whatever I have to do to not let any tension creep into my chest when I'm breathing. So if I'm thinking 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, I may breathe over 3 and 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. Whatever it takes to stay relaxed, make room to expand and let a big amount of air rush into the lungs. Okay? All right. Now, so there's my breathing exercises to get myself focused, my body focused on an effective breathing for the instrument. Okay? Now, that is the fundamental skill. And as a fundamental, it's like we're building our foundation beneath our house. And everything we do adds to that. So when we pick up the mouthpiece to do a mouthpiece buzz, I'm still going to breathe the same way. Now I can't have my hand out here, but I can have my hand here. So I may think 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Fast. 1, 2, 3. Or really fast. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2. But that breath is still, that inhalation and exhalation is still the same. And one of your skills is to know when that's not happening and be able to step back. So if it's not, my buzz isn't working, 1, 2, 3. The first thing I do is I ask myself, what was happening with the breathing? And if you notice there, I kind of held my breath and I put tension. So there was no energy. There was no wind moving across my lips. So I go back and I practice, I isolate that breathing only. 1, 2, 3. To reestablish that proper breath. Now I can put the mouthpiece back in. 1, 2, 3. Okay. So don't be afraid to take a step back, or 2 or 3 steps back, to go back and reestablish that breathing. Okay. Now, we can use some imagery on this exhale part that helps us with making that wind move outward with energy. It's that energetic wind stream that gives us all of our sound and our technique. Okay? And once again, I'm using the articulation of a T syllable. If you say time to talk, that's the basic simple T, time to talk, very light T. And when I'm adding my articulation, and this is a whole nother masterclass, but I just want to get to the wind part of this. Our goal is to get the tongue out of the way and blow the tongue out of the way and get to the wind. Okay? So once again, we're trying to go, and some little visual imagery you can use in your head. And this is from our friends Sam Palafian and Pat Sheridan. And you can look this information up at their breathing gym. There's some great videos on YouTube. I'll post some information at the end. They have some books. But The imagery of when I'm breathing for loud, for full fortissimo or forte dynamics, they use the imagery of shooting an arrow. So the breathing is still the same here. We're still having the inhales here, but I'm releasing that air with my articulation. And you notice how my fingers are releasing the string for the arrow. That connects exactly with my articulation, my tongue. So this imagery again is make lots of room, be relaxed, and shoot that arrow. And remember, when an arrow moves, it's moving out there. And so the wind is really out here moving. And when I do this, I put my hand out here and I can still feel the wind on the back of my hand. 1, 2, 3. Okay? If I'm going to do a kind of medium mezzo dynamics, I don't need quite the forceful energy to the wind, but I still need it to be moving outward and forward. Okay? All of our wind is moving forward. And so Pat and Sam, they use the imagery of throwing a dart. You know, it's not quite as forceful as an arrow. It's this. I'm going to throw a dart. But again, the release of the dart coincides with my tongue, and I feel the wind here. The energy, still energetic wind stream, just not quite as much energy as the arrow. 1, 2, 3. What about piano dynamics? Well, their imagery for piano dynamics is paper airplane. How we just want the paper airplane to lift across the room. Again, I release the paper airplane with my tongue. 2, 3. So there's some imagery for you to use. And in summary, once again, this is a skill that must be practiced. Because you have these visual and tactile cues, you need to do this somewhere where you can see yourself. And so if you're looking at yourself here, what happens to my breathing apparatus? Oh, yeah, I'm not making good room. So find a mirror somewhere that you can see your whole upper body, or take a video of yourself doing this. Okay? And remember, you've got to practice this. These skills we want to program into the operating system. Okay? All right. That is my mini masterclass for the fundamentals of breathing.